morning, everyone. We will be starting our webinar in another 10 minutes. For those of you who are typing in the chat box to say that you are not able to hear anything, that is because no one is speaking currently, and we will only start at 11 o'clock. And if you can hear me now, it means that your audio system is working fine. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the IRCC Study Permit webinar on the new changes and temporary processes put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Anindita Buragohai, and I am the Outreach Officer for IRCC Delhi. Our webinar today will have two sections. The first is the presentation, and the second part is the Q&A section. To do the presentation, we have Shikhir Gupta, who is our Outreach Officer for IRCC Chandigarh, and your queries will be addressed by Elena Balboa, who is the Student and Worker Unit Manager from IRCC Delhi. With regards to the questions and answers, please note a few points. Kindly do not send in your questions in the chat box. Please send all your questions only in the Q&A part of your panel. Note that any questions which are sent in the chat section will probably not be picked up, and therefore you might not receive an answer to your question. So please type in your questions in the question and answer part of the panel. The second thing is, once the Q&A starts, we will go through the questions gradually, and also we will be answering only generic questions. So kindly do not send any case-specific questions pertaining only to your respective application, because we would like to address those queries which will be for the general information of all participants who have joined the webinar today. The third thing is, please do not keep sending the same question over and over again, because what happens in that case is that your questions kind of get lost in the whole big list of questions which keep coming in, and sometimes because of this reason we end up overseeing your question, because we receive so many questions once everyone starts sending them in. So kindly remember that once you have sent in your question, we will have a look at it and we will respond to it. If for whatever reason you feel that it has been a while and your question has still not been answered, then yes, you can ping us once, but kindly refrain from sharing the same question 2, 3, or 4 times over and over again. With that, I hope that the webinar today and the information provided will be helpful for you. And now I would request Shikhir to start the presentation from his end. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a good time.
Thanks, Anandita. Before I begin, can you please confirm if I'm audible?
Yes, Shikhir, you're audible.
Thanks a lot, Anandita. So very good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning into our webinar on study permit processing during the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Shikhir, and I'm the Outreach Officer at the Consulate General of Canada in Chandigarh. The purpose of today's webinar is to inform you about the changes to study permit applications and current travel restrictions in the view of the ongoing pandemic. The target audience of this webinar are students from India who are interested in pursuing a Canadian post-secondary education. Before we begin, please note that the contents of this webinar are valid only as of today. For the most current information on IRCC processes and travel restrictions to Canada, please visit our website www.canada.ca/immigration. To begin with, we realize that international students make significant cultural and social contributions to Canada. They also generate more than $21 billion in economic activity. Since the onset of the pandemic, IRCC has implemented a number of temporary policy changes to support and reassure international students and designated learning institutions. The fall 2020 semester has by far the largest international student intake throughout the academic year, and it is fast approaching. The most recently implemented measures were introduced on July 14 and are aimed at this upcoming cohort. The changes will continue Canada's reputation as a premier destination for international students, and they will demonstrate the importance of the International Student Program and the contribution international students make to Canada. We strongly encourage students to still consider studying at Canadian institutions, even if many DLIs have moved their fall 2020 semester to an online format. Moving on, our agenda today will cover the following topics. Number 1, our travel restrictions to Canada. Number 2, our exemptions to those travel restrictions. Number 3, study permit processing changes during the pandemic. Number 4, our fraud tips. And lastly, what you need to know before traveling to Canada. We will end the presentation with a question and answer session. Please use the Q&A box to send us your questions and we will go through them after the presentation. Travel to Canada. Until further notice, most foreign nationals cannot travel to Canada even if they have a valid visitor visa or an electronic travel authorization. These restrictions stop non-essential or non-discretionary travel to Canada. In the light of these travel restrictions, this list reflects who is currently able to travel to Canada. For example, Canadian citizens, Canadian permanent residents, and protected persons. It also includes foreign nationals who require entry for an essential purpose and are exempt from travel restrictions. Now let's talk about some of these exemptions to these travel restrictions. Basically, all temporary residents need to demonstrate that they are traveling to Canada for an essential purpose. Essential refers to reasons for traveling that are non-discretionary and non-optional. Emergency orders made under the Quarantine Act do not permit people to travel to Canada for optional or discretionary purpose, such as tourism, recreation, or entertainment. Now looking at who are exempt. These are some workers, some students, some approved PRs, and potentially some visitors looking to reunite with immediate family members already in Canada. Please note that visitors will need an authorization letter to travel to Canada if family in Canada is not a Canadian PR or citizen of Canada. Please also note that students and workers will not require such letter. In this slide, let's look at travel restriction exemptions for students in more detail. Not all students will be able to travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. To be exempt, you must be in possession of either a study permit visa issued on or before March 18, 2020, or a port of entry letter of introduction which indicates your study permit was approved on or before March 18, 2020. Equally as important, you must also be able to demonstrate that it is essential for you to travel to Canada. For example, you have in-person classes or you are already in the middle of a program of study and need to return to it. You can demonstrate this by providing a recently dated letter from your DLI that explains why you physically need to be in Canada for the fall semester. These documents must be provided to the airline at the time of boarding and to CBSA once you reach a port of entry in Canada. Failure to do this may result in denied boarding for your flight or audition letters for students. All you need to travel is your visa or port of entry introduction letter and evidence of your essential need to travel. This is very important to note that you should not travel to Canada until at most 3 weeks previous semester but were not able to travel to Canada to attend. Please send us a copy of your new letters of acceptance and advise us of your new start date. You can send these documents to us via the web form. Now let's look at what processing changes have been introduced as a result of the pandemic. Visa application centers, also known as VACs, are currently closed. This means we are unable to accept any paper. IRCC website, we normally publish processing times for each of our missions for all our lines of business. Please note that these processing times are no longer accurate, as there are processing delays due to reduced staff at the mission. That being said, IRCC is working very hard to process all visa applications in time for the fall 2020 semester. To do this, we need your help by submitting your application as early as possible and submitting all of the required documents as soon as possible. We are aware of many service disruptions that are causing delays in submitting a complete application. For example, we know that VACs remain closed. This means that there is no that it may take longer for you to obtain an appointment to complete your immigration medical exam. We also know that some businesses and schools remain closed or are operating at limited capacity. This means it may take longer for you to obtain your supporting documents you need for your application. All of that being said, We will not refuse any application for non-compliance or failure to submit the requested documents at this time. This means you do not have to worry about the deadline specified in the request letter sent to you. However, note that we will not be able to complete the processing of your application until all required and requested documents have been received. So it is in your favor to submit these documents to us as soon as possible. The exception to this are three following documents. You must provide them upfront or your application may be refused. First is the application forms. You do not have an application unless you complete the IRCC forms required. Number two is the fee. This includes both the study permit processing fee and the biometrics fee. Third is the letter of acceptance, also known as the LOA, from a designated learning institute in Canada. This is mandatory for you to submit with your application. Please note that we cannot physically issue any visas until the WACs reopen because we have no mechanism for two-way transmission of passports between you, the client, and us, the visa office. We are, however, attempting to return passports for any existing paper files at the mission, as we realize this is an important identity document for you. Any documents mailed directly to the mission will be returned to the sender, so please do not attempt to send your passport directly to us. Please wait for the WACs to reopen. So I've previously indicated that only those with visas issued on or before March 18 may travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. The recently introduced measures address applications which have not yet received approval as of March 18. Here are those measures. First is that complete study permit applications will be prioritized. This means that application contains the forms, the fee, medical, biometrics, the letter of acceptance, and all required supporting documents. Second, if your program of study will qualify you for a postgraduate work permit, also known as Pgwp, and part of your course, that is fall 2020 semester, has been moved to an online format because of the pandemic, the time spent on the online portion while outside of Canada will still count towards time on your Pgwp. However, the online portion must be 50% or less of your entire program of study. This means you will still need to complete minimum half of your program in Canada for all that time to count towards your Pgwp. Third is that a two-stage approval process will provide some breathing room for students who are not yet able to provide biometrics or medicals. The first stage is the approval in principle, also known as AIP. This is essentially the eligibility assessment for your application. If you receive an AIP approval, your online course time will count towards eligibility and final decisions on your application. In cases of approval, this results in visa issuance. Please also note that an AIP approval is not a guarantee of a visa. Stage 2 includes admissibility decisions. For example, you may be refused a visa despite having an AIP because you have failed your medical exam. So let's discuss this in more detail, what the two stages entail. So the AIP applies to applications which have not yet received final decision as of March 18. It refers to the eligibility assessment of your application. Essentially, it means that even though you are still missing medicals or biometrics, you may still be able to receive an AIP on your application. The criteria for this assessment has not changed. Neither the requirements nor how an officer makes that assessment. Here are the criteria. Number one is that you're a genuine student. This means you have demonstrated the academic and language capabilities through the submission of your previous academic transcripts and IELTS or TOEFL scores that you are able and qualified to complete a program of study in Canada. Number two, you've been accepted by a designated learning institute in Canada. This means you have submitted a valid LOA or letter of acceptance from a DL expenses and transportation without working. This means you have submitted financial evidence of liquid funds to pay for these, that is tuition, transportation, and living expenses for all the remaining years of studies. And number four, an explanation of what your ties are to your home country, which will motivate you to leave Canada once your visa expires. Once you receive the approval in principle in your application, a letter stream. So first, let's look at the SDS list of mandatory documents for the AIP. First is that you need a valid LOA from a designated learning institute in Canada. Number two is that you need to provide IELTS test results demonstrating 6 in each band. Only in-person test results will be accepted. We are not accepting online test results. Number three is that you need to show a receipt or documentation from the designated learning institute that tuition has been paid for the first year. If you also have scholarships or grants, you should also provide documentation to demonstrate this as a part of this requirement. Number four is that you have to provide a receipt for a GIC of 10,000 Canadian dollars. Number five is that you have to submit most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And lastly, for Quebec-bound students, you need a CAQ. Now, for the non-SDS stream, these are the mandatory documents for the AIP. Number one is to submit a valid LOA from a DLI in Canada. Number two is to provide IELTS or TOEFL test results. Again, no online English test results will be accepted. Number three is to show documentation that demonstrates you have liquid funds and enough money to pay for tuition, living expenses, and transportation for the first year of school, plus an explanation and evidence of how you intend to pay for all the remaining subsequent years of school without relying on working in Canada. Fourth is to submit your most recent secondary or post-secondary school transcripts. And last but not the least, you need a CAQ for Quebec-bound students. Additionally, we would recommend you to submit a letter explaining why you chose your program of study. Admissibility assessments are made after AIP and before visa issuance. They include assessments such as medical, criminality, and biometrics, among other things. This means that you must, number one, provide biometrics, number two, complete your immigration medical exam, number three, answer all questions truthfully and completely. This includes declaring all previous visa refusals for all countries, providing all of your background history for the last 10 years, and being truthful about any previous arrests and criminal history. And lastly, you must always remember to submit only authentic documents. It is important to note that the required documents to submit under SDS has not changed. We realize that due to service disruptions, you may not be able to submit all of the required documents to qualify under this stream. Examples of this may be upfront medicals, IELTS results, GIC, etc. If you are unable to submit a required document, for example, upfront medicals, your application will be moved to the non-SDS stream. This section applies to students who are already in Canada. Essentially, if a student switched to part-time studies or had to take a break in studies, for example, the spring semester may have been cancelled due to the pandemic, they may still continue to work on and off campus, provided that they were previously a full-time student and already authorized to work on or off campus pre-pandemic. For off-campus works, the maximum limit is still 20 hours per week during the academic session and full-time during regular academic breaks. For students who are in essential services, this could include jobs in health sector, for example. They can work more than 20 hours per week up till August 31st. To qualify for this, they need a valid study permit, must currently be in an academic session, authorized to work on or off campus, and must be working in an essential job. For those who are not yet in Canada, a common question we are asked is if you can go to Canada and work those maximum 12 hours per week while taking online classes for the fall semester. The short answer to this is no. I would like to remind you of what we discussed in the earlier slides regarding what students need to demonstrate in order to travel to Canada. Unless your physical presence is required for your studies in the fall semester, it is not essential for you to travel to Canada at this time. Additionally, only students with visas issued on or before March 18 can travel to Canada under the current travel restrictions. This section also refers to students who have already begun their classes in Canada. There are a number of reasons why a designated learning institute may authorize leave during studies, such as strikes, family emergencies, medical reasons, etc. To be considered actively pursuing studies, your authorized leave must not exceed 150 days from your first day of leave. Failure to do so means that you have not complied with the conditions of your study permit and may result in your removal from Canada. If for whatever reason you require leave longer than 150 days, you should change your status from a student to a visitor. Forms and instructions for this can be found on our website. It is very important to note that you cannot study elsewhere or work during your authorized leave period. In case a DLI may have to close permanently as a consequence of the pandemic, you should either A. Enroll in a new program of study with another DLI, B. Change your status from student to visitor, or C. Leave Canada. For the purpose of assessing if a student is enrolled and actively pursuing their studies, any time taken to transition to a new DLIN program, change status, or leave Canada should not exceed 150 days from the date the school closed. Please be informed that there is a significant difference between distance learning and the online courses I've been mentioning. Distance learning courses are always only offered remotely online, even under normal circumstances. The online courses I'm speaking about for the fall 2020 semester are normally offered as in-person classes. However, they have been moved to an online format due to the pandemic, and DLIs intend to return them to an in-person class program post-pandemic. Those taking online courses for a program of study which would normally qualify them for a Pgwp can have that time counted towards the Pgwp even if they have not yet begun their studies in Canada. Students can complete 50% of their program online if they cannot travel to Canada sooner. For students who have already begun their program of study in Canada, switching from full-time status to part-time status due to the pandemic will not affect their Pgwp eligibility. Note that this applies only to the winter, spring, and summer semesters. For the fall 2020 semester, it is expected that students take on a full online course load in order for that time to be counted towards their Pgwp. In this section, we want to inform you of various fraud activities and misinformation related to immigration applications. You may scan the QR code on the screen as I speak. Number one is to protect yourself and never share your personal information with unauthorized agents. If something sounds too good to be true, in all probability, it is. Number two are fraudulent websites and scams. Websites and social media accounts may claim to be from the Government of Canada. Applicants are tricked into transferring money for services that will never be provided to them. Our official website is www.canada/immigration. Third are email scams. Please be informed that IRCC will never send you an email from a private address like Hotmail or Gmail. IRCC addresses always end in .gc.ca or canada.ca. Fourth are telephone scams. Please note that IRCC will never ask you for any sort of payment by telephone. And lastly are unauthorized agents. We always say that you do not have to use a consultant to submit an application. However, if you do choose to use one, make sure that they are legally authorized under Canadian laws. Many agents may tell you that they are authorized, but it is always very important to go through their website to check if they have been approved by ICCRC. You can also scan the QR code on the screen for more information. Please be informed that no one can guarantee you a visa. An unauthorized agent based out of Punjab released a video yesterday stating that he had spoken with an immigration officer who provided a 100% guarantee that his clients will receive a visa. This is absolutely false. No one can guarantee you a visa. All applications must be reviewed by an officer who will then render the decision based on the information before them. Please do not believe any agent who tells you that he can guarantee you a visa. Now let's look at conditions by which you must abide before air travel to Canada. The airline will require the following documents from you. Number 1 is your passport. Number 2 is a valid study permit visa issued on or before March 18. And number 3 are documents to demonstrate that your travel to Canada is essential. Failure to provide any of these documents may result in you being denied boarding. Additionally, you will be required to pass a health check performed by the airline officials just before your flight. If you are showing any COVID-19 symptoms, you may also be denied boarding. If you are approved for boarding, note that you must wear a non-medical mask or face covering upon arrival in Canada. All travelers must undergo a health check upon arrival in Canada. It is also mandatory that all passengers arriving in Canada must self-quarantine for 14 days. This means that all travelers must have a plan to self-quarantine for 14 days, confirm and provide evidence that they have a suitable place to quarantine. This means providing an address and explaining how they intend to self-quarantine if other people live at the same location, and explain how you intend to respect that quarantine plan. For example, explain how you intend to receive essential items such as food. Please do not travel to Canada unless you have a viable quarantine plan. Failure to comply has consequences, which includes a fine up to 750,000 Canadian dollars, 6 months in prison, being deemed inadmissible, removed from Canada, and banned from entering Canada for 1 year. For more information, here are the many ways to connect with us and find out more information. The IRCC website is mentioned, which is www.canada.ca/immigration. You can also follow us on our Facebook and Twitter handles by the name of Canada in India. And you can also go through our YouTube channel, which contains many important tips and incidents of fraud. So with that, we come to the end of this presentation. Now it's over to Anandita and Alina for the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakir, for the very detailed presentation. Elena, are we ready to start with the questions?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so the first question is fully submitted files prior to March 18th or before the lockdown are also receiving AIPs or approval in principle. So then is that how it is, and why are they receiving AIPs? What people are asking.
So if I understood that question correctly, clients who've had their visa approval are receiving AIP letters. That shouldn't be correct.
No, they're not receiving. They were not approved for the visas. They had submitted full files, which means that they probably had their medicals and biometrics. Yeah, and they're receiving AIPs now.
So of course, yes, you need your AIP if you want reassurance that your courses for the fall semester will be counted towards the Pgwp.
The other question now is something a lot of people are asking. So I'm addressing this to all the people who are asking about our processing time. So there are people who submitted their application in June, in July, and even now, and they're asking about the processing times for AIP results, both for SDS as well as non-SDS.
So there are currently no processing times of when these AIP letters will be submitted. Sorry, Anandita, I'm receiving feedback from one of your speakers.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You
need to mute one of your speakers because we're hearing it on echo. Okay, thank you. So for AIP, the processing times there are no processing times essentially. We are working very hard to provide AIP letters to all of the students who have submitted their application but have not yet received a visa. We are hoping that all of these AIP letters will be sent to you before the fall starts. However, with this two-stage processing, even if you do receive your AIP letter after you've begun your semester, the entire semester will still count towards your postgraduate work permit, provided that you have submitted your study permit application before September 15.
Okay, the next question is, in a non-SDS category, documents submitted are LOA, financial proofs, and application forms, as well as medical exam proof. Will that be enough for processing the application?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
In a non-SDS category, the documents submitted are LOA, financial proofs, and application forms, as well as medical exam proof. Will that be enough for processing the application?
So we've given you a list of all of the documents that you submit in order for us to provide an AIP. So for the AIP, it's your LOA, it's your language test results, it's financial proof. And I would also highly recommend that you submit a letter of motivation explaining why you've chosen your program of study, as well as outlining a financial plan of how you intend to pay for the remaining years of schooling. Now, for beyond AIP is your stage 2. Stage 2 includes biometrics and medicals. All of these documents that I've mentioned, we cannot exempt you from submitting any of them. So they have to be submitted eventually if you want a visa.
Okay. I think we still have an echo problem, so I'm not sure where that is coming from, but let's try continuing this, and if it gets worse, then maybe we'll have to try and fix this. So the next question is, when do you believe the visa application centers are supposed to open in Delhi and Chandigarh?
So we do not have a set time frame of when the reopening of the VACs will occur. I can tell you that we are regularly evaluating the situation on the ground, and we are looking for options or opportunities of when we can safely open the VACs. So number one, we have to take into account the health and safety of the VFS staff who are working in these centers. We also have to take into account the health and safety of all the clients who will be going to these VACs to use their services, right? So this is you, the audience right now, who are the students who want to apply. We want to make sure that for all of you who are coming into the spaces that we've hired to provide you these services to assist you with your visa application, that they are safe for you to go to. During this pandemic, the situation is very fluid. So we're regularly analyzing, we're regularly looking at the situation. There are people who are trying to decide when it would be best. At this time, we do not have a date of when the VACs will be reopened.
The next question is, for individuals under the SDS category, how long would be the processing time? Are you expecting it to provide the decision before September 15th?
So for SDS and for non-SDS, right now the processing times are not accurate. We are doing our best to process all of the applications as quickly as possible, especially for those who are destined for class for fall 2020. We are focusing on all of these cases so that you can at the very least get your AIP before the start of your class. Now, in terms of finalizing cases, we are currently not finalizing any applications that are to be approved because we cannot at this time issue any visas. Once the VACs reopen, we will finalize all of these cases in queue, and then you will be sent a passport request letter, which you can then send to the VAC. But again, this all banks on the VACs reopening. So we ask you to be patient. Please monitor the VFS website because that will provide you the information you need when it is decided that the VACs will reopen. And then when that occurs, I'm sure there will be also further instructions on whether or not you need to make appointments, etc., other health and safety measures that need to be taken into account if you intend to use those services, and then we'll move from there. Thank you.
The next question is it absolutely necessary for individuals to give a language proficiency test for the AIP stage? Some schools have started their own language tests. Are those students allowed to submit their study visa applications without the language exams?
So at this time, because of the pandemic, we realized that there are a lot of English language test centers that are closed. And so we are allowing you to submit your application without these English language test results. However, you will need these test results in order to receive an AIP on your application. For SDS, there is no change to the criteria, which means that you need to submit IELTS results upfront with your application submission. Otherwise, your application will be moved to the non-SDS stream.
The next question is PCC mandatory? A PCC would be a police certificate.
No, please do not submit a police certificate unless a visa officer requests for one. If you want to submit it, you're welcome to, but it's a rare case where we actually need to see one. Thank you.
The next question asks, is there an IRCC pattern to pick up study permit files? Because people are noticing that those who've applied in June and July have started getting AIPs, whereas the people who applied in March, April, or May, including the person who's asking this question, have still not received their AIPs.
So an AIP means that you have a valid letter of acceptance where it indicates the date of when you're meant to start classes, and this date is somewhere in the future. A lot of the applications submitted in March, April, and May are for the spring and summer semesters. And so that means that those LOAs are no longer valid because they indicate a start date for a program that has already passed. If you have not yet submitted your updated letter of acceptance with a new date in the future telling us that your enrollment has been deferred to either the fall 2020 semester or to a semester in 2021, you need to send this to us right away. So I can tell you that for all of the older cases, this is the primary holdup for the AIP, that the letters of acceptances on those files indicate a start date that is now passed, and so those LOAs are no longer valid. So please submit the updated LOA indicating a new start date, reflecting your enrollment deferral to a future semester. And please submit this to us via web form as soon as possible so that you can get your AIP letter. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from a person who's already submitted their study permit from Delhi in India. Now they're planning to go visit their parents who stay in Indonesia, and what they're asking is, can they submit their biometrics in a visa application center in Indonesia and then get their visa right from there? And if it can happen, then will they get an approved visa right away, or will they still get an AIP in that case?
So at this time, globally, I can tell you that no study permit applications are being approved, right? Because for the most part, all VACs are closed, and where VACs might be open, there is still the travel restriction. Anyone who receives a visa post March 18 cannot travel to Canada. So there honestly is no rush for you to get these visas because you can't travel to Canada anyways, not at this time. However, if you do find yourself in a country where there is a VAC that is opened and they are providing biometric collection services, you are welcome to submit your biometrics. If at that time that, for example, travel restrictions may have been lifted, if you happen to still find yourself in Indonesia, and applications are now being approved and visas are being issued, yes, you can certainly submit your passport to the VAC in Indonesia, and then your application will be issued a visa through our office in Jakarta. Thank you.
So the next question is, most universities have mentioned a deadline of 21st September for deferment of course or refund of fees. AIP does not guarantee a study permit, and hence there is a fear of loss of one semester fees if we do not receive it till then. What would you suggest?
So the decision is wholly up to you of whether or not you want to take the risk and invest in a Canadian education for the fall 2020 semester. I can tell you that if you do receive an AIP, the failure rate at a stage 2 is very, very, very low compared to the total numbers. I can tell you the two main reasons of why we might refuse at stage 2. Number 1, you've either provided fake documents or provided incorrect or incomplete information in your application. That's the number one thing. So this you can help yourself, right? Number 1, so provide genuine documents and then make sure that you read every single question carefully in your application and that you answer it truthfully and completely. So you can avoid this reason for refusal. The second is that there may be an issue with your medicals. So medicals forms part of stage 2. Usually what happens is that this is related to tuberculosis or TB. And for students who are found to have TB, what usually happens is that you go through what we call a medical furtherance process, where a student is given maybe 12 to 16 weeks to do additional testing and to go through a drug regimen to improve your medical situation. And then after that, you go through another round of tests, and then hopefully by then you'll pass your exam. Very, 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 very rarely have I seen someone actually refused because their health did not improve. Usually, when it relates to medical furtherances, refusals occur because a student has refused to comply with the instructions they are given. So again, this is completely in your hands. If, for example, you are obligated to go through the medical furtherance process, just follow all of the instructions within the time frame given to you. So really, you can control a lot of what could happen in terms of a failure for stage 2. So to me, investing for the fall 2020 semester with just an AIP, when you look at overall numbers and what the actual refusal rate is for a stage 2, is very, very low risk. But the decision remains up to you. Thank you.
The next question is, what if our classes start and we have still not received our AIP approval? What are we suggested to do in a situation like that?
So really, all you can do is be patient. As I mentioned earlier, as long as your application is submitted before September 15, and if you receive your AIP even afterwards, after you've started your classes, it's okay because your entire semester will still count towards your Pgwp. So even if the AIP is late, don't worry about that piece because the whole semester will still count. We are doing our best to try to get everyone their AIP before the start of classes in September. So right now we're on August 13. We have about 3 weeks before classes start. And I can promise you, yes, we are doing our best to get all of those AIPs out. I would recommend that all students who have not yet received their AIP, please continue to monitor your online portal as well as your email for any request letters that may be sent your way in case there are documents that are missing that we need in order to make this AIP decision. And as I had mentioned earlier, the main reason for the holdup for AIP right now is the updated LOAs for a lot of the older cases. So please send those to us as soon as possible. Thank you.
The next person says that they were issued a visa on January 2020 and now their visa will expire in November 2020. They obviously could not travel during the first issuance of the visa. So now what are they expected to do and how can they renew their visa or extend their visa?
So you need to do a few things. Number 1, you need to get us an updated letter of acceptance reflecting your deferment of enrollment to a date in the future. That's number 1. Number 2, you need to purchase a receipt. You can buy this online for $30. This is a document replacement fee. And then with this document replacement fee plus the updated LOA, please send us an email or use the web form rather and upload all of these documents. And I want you to explain why you were not able to travel and that you're requesting for a document replacement. Essentially, you're asking for a new visa with new dates on those. So this is only applicable for persons who were not able to travel because of the shutdown of commercial flights, right? And where you haven't traveled to Canada before. If you've already used your visa, there is no such document replacement for you. You need to just apply for a new visa. Thank you.
The next question is, I have my letter of acceptance issued till 2nd September 2020. What if I'm unable to receive an AIP prior to that?
So say the first part again, Soraya Nandita.
Of this person's letter of acceptance is 2nd September 2020. Is what they've mentioned in their question. And if they don't receive an AIP prior to 2nd September, then what are they supposed to do in that case?
So this is the same as the previous question answered, that you just need to be patient and wait for that AIP. You can either start your classes, that's completely up to you. But frankly, why don't you? So as long as your application was received before September 15, and you receive your AIP after you've started your classes, your whole semester will still count towards your postgraduate work permit. In case you don't get your AIP, and frankly, as long as you provide all of the documentation we requested, there should be no reason why. So, let's go through some of those things again. That you need a valid LOA, that you need to show funds for a full year. So, and that's, not just tuition, but living expenses and transportation as well. If you're applying via SDS, this is a full year tuition paid, plus your GIC. You need to show language test results. So this is in-person test results. Each band must be 6.0 or higher, whether SDS or not. So if you're taking a different type of test, like TOEFL or PTE, make sure that you are receiving the equivalent of 6.0 in each band. And then for Quebec students, CAQ. So as long as you have those documents, you should be confident that you should be getting an AIP. And like I said, highly, highly recommended. Include a letter of motivation explaining why you chose your program of study, as well as explaining your financial plan to pay for your remaining years of school. And in case you do have, say, for example, education gap, where you went to school, you worked for a little bit, maybe for several years, and then now you want to go back to school, you should also explain your reasons for why you're wanting to go back to school and explain what you were doing during that break. All of this will factor into your decision for AIP.
Okay, the next question is a very interesting one. So this person has a visitor visa, and what they're asking is if the travel restrictions are lifted and they can go to Canada on their visitor visa, can they get the biometrics for their study permit done in Canada and then get their study permit issued?
No. Your study permit will not be issued in Canada. Your study permit will be issued abroad. So, because in Canada, the number one, the Service Canada centers will have to reopen in order for biometrics to be able to be collected. And right now they're closed. They're not doing any biometrics collections in Canada. We will not allow for biometrics collection at the port of entry for a case for this circumstance that's described. So that's not a possibility. I would recommend that you wait for your study permit to be sorted out abroad and then travel on your study permit before going to Canada.
The next question is PTE going to be accepted for a study permit application?
Yes, we can accept PTE under the one condition that you provide us access to your results online. So in the PTE portal, you need to send your results to Ircc. Do not give us your login, do not give us your password, because when we try to do it, they ask us all sorts of security questions and we can't access your results. You need to send it through the portal to Ircc. If you do not do this, your application may be refused.
The next person is asking, what if they get an AIP refusal? Is it allowed for them to reapply again? And by then, if the September classes start, what do we suggest? Do we recommend that they wait to receive their AIP for the September intake, or should they defer their intake to January 2021?
So we're not providing any advice on this because really the decision is up to you. We're only providing you the facts of how we're doing the processing and what might factor into your decisions.
Okay, this seems more like a rumor which is doing the rounds. So a lot of agents seem to be saying the students that private colleges or institutes are not receiving visas. Would you like to comment on this, Elena?
That's not true. So we do not do any sort of triaging based on the type of school you intend to go to. We work on a first in, first out generally. So yeah, we look at the oldest applications and start working on those. Yes, that's it.
So the next question is asking, can we defer our admission after receiving an AIP, even after receiving an AIP?
Yes, you can defer your enrollment. Please ensure that you do submit to us your updated LOA so that we can update your file. Otherwise, you may have issues later.
Next question is asking, the person is asking, by when is it expected that Canada will lift their travel restrictions?
So the current travel restrictions have an expiry date of August 31st. They could potentially be extended, they could potentially be amended, or they could just be kiboshed altogether. So we won't know this until closer to that date.
This person is asking, what about those students who were issued a visa before 18th March 2020 and their classes are going to start physically now? So what are they supposed to do? Can they travel to Canada?
Their visa was issued before March 18?
Yes.
So yes, you can travel, right? So number one, you need to show us you have a valid passport, that you have a valid visa that was issued on or before March 18, and that you need to show us documents indicating that you have in-person classes. So if you can show us these 3 documents, you can certainly board a plane and come to Canada.
The next question is there any deadline or last date for submission of application for the fall 2020 semester?
While there is no deadline, if you want your AIP before you start classes, the sooner you submit, the better. Frankly, we're already in mid-August. So if you haven't yet submitted, you need to do this now.
Okay, so this seems to be an information which is being shared a lot in the market currently or outside. So the person is asking that it seems like a lot of complete applications are not receiving their AIP, but a lot of incomplete applications are receiving their AIPs now. Would you like to comment on that?
So I cannot confirm any of that information. We are working hard to go through all of the applications to ensure that everyone gets their AIP in time. As I said, there's no accurate processing times, and there's a lot of volume we need to get to because keep in mind, we have limited resources at the mission, and limited resources in Canada as well who are helping us with our workload. But we're doing our best. So whether it's the Delhi office or our sister offices in Canada, who are trying to work through all of these files as quickly as possible to get everyone their AIPs, whether your application is complete or not.
The next question is, what can someone defer their admission or defer their course after doing the first semester if their university or college is not providing a good online study experience? And in that case, what happens to their AIP?
So what you're trying to tell me is that you've done your fall 2020 semester online, and then if in case the winter 2021, like January 2021, is still online, the student would like to defer that and wait until in-person classes resume, if you want to choose to do that, that's up to you as well. That has no bearing on your AIP that was given to you.
The next is about something which a lot of people are asking. What is the success rate for a non-SDS and an SDS application in the current scenario?
So you're asking about approval rates. SDS generally has a higher approval rate only because the assessment that needs to be made is more straightforward based on the documents that we demand for SDS. Whereas non-SDS, there's a lot more discretion on behalf of the students in terms of what types of documents they can submit. And this is what makes the assessment more complicated. And when it gets more complicated, this usually results in a higher refusal rate.
So the two-stage process which is currently in place, will it also apply for those students who were enrolled for the January 2021 intake, or is it only for fall 2020?
Yeah, the measures are currently only for fall 2020. Whether or not they'll be extended to January 2021, this is a possibility, certainly. Depends on the situation on the ground, what's happening in terms of the pandemic. But as of right now, it only applies to fall 2020.
I'm just sorting through questions to see if we have something which is quite new and we have not answered them before. If you do come across anything from your end, please feel free to pick it up, Elena. Okay, so here is the question. If we submit our application that includes all the necessary documents along with medical but no biometrics, will the medical be taken up in first stage of approval, or will it be kept on hold for the second stage and processed with biometrics?
So when we look at an application, we basically want to touch an application only once. So if an application is complete, we will do both the stage 1 and the stage 2 assessments, except enter a final decision if it's an approval. Only because, as I mentioned earlier, we're not issuing visas because VACs remain closed and there's still the travel ban. If the medicals or biometrics are missing, which means we can't do stage 2, then we'll just do the AIP. But if the biometrics and medicals are there, yes, we will assess them all at the same time, so that basically the last thing that needs to be done in your application is just visa issuance for those that are going to be approved. If you receive your AIP, the AIP doesn't necessarily mean that we haven't looked at stage 2. It could certainly mean that. So if you have an online application and you have an online account, this is where you can actually see whether or not you've at what stage your application may be at, if you're worried about stage 2. But really, with the AIP letters that you'll be receiving, that's all that it's going to tell you. It will not address stage 2. But if you had already submitted those 2 other items with your application, we may have also already looked at those as well. We won't look at your application twice if we don't have to. So we'll do all of those assessments all at once.
The next question is, my start date for the course was 3rd September, and the new start date as issued by the university now is 21st September 2020. In that case, should I send an updated LOA to IRCC, and how should I send it?
Please use the web form to send us any information or documents. If you want to inform us of a change in your LOA, I mean, frankly, this is better for you, because in case there are checks, whether by the airline through our CBSA or at the port of entry to confirm your information, it's better that there is no discrepancy with the documents you may have on hand as you're traveling versus what we see in the system. This is always to your favor that they all match.
The next question is about internet connectivity and online classes. So this person has all his classes online now, and they have very bad had internet connectivity, and they now have a letter issued by their institute which says that it'll be better for them to come and do physical classes in Canada, or just classes in Canada, because they will have better internet connectivity. So will that be enough for them to travel to Canada if they already have an approved visa with them?
And this visa was issued before March 18?
The question is saying that they already have an approved visa.
Okay, so if you meet one piece of the requirements, that you have a visa issued before March 18, and now you're saying, and now your need to go to Canada is due to poor internet connectivity, really the judgment of what documents to demonstrate this is for CBSA. This is not to be included in your study permit application because we're not the ones who are judging whether or not this reason is valid for you to travel. This is really CBSA to whom you should be directing this question.
Next person is asking, once we have submitted an updated LOA to IRCC, how much time does IRCC take at their end to update it in their system? Because this person is specifically asking this because they seem to have shared their LOA with us in May 2020, the updated LOA, and they have not seemed to receive an update yet from our end.
So as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to work through the backlog of cases as quickly as possible. I don't know all of the details of your case. It may not just be about your updated LOA. There could be other things that is deficient in your application. I do not know, so I really can't comment on this.
The next question is about AIP. This seems to be the hot topic because, of course, it is new and there seem to be a lot of misinformation out there. So this person is asking that the AIP approvals that IRCC is issuing currently, are they? Is there any format to them? Or is IRCC issuing them on a first come first serve basis, or they're just picking up random applications? Would you like to comment on that, Alina?
So in terms of the AIP letter itself, so we basically pull these lists from the system through which we work, and we normally work based on date of receipt. So you know, I'm finding a trend that this complaint is coming from a lot of people who have applied in March, April, May, and because you know their LOAs are older. And this is likely why you may not have received it, but the persons who applied in July and August are receiving theirs because they have updated LOAs. So really, I mean, we're doing our best to try to get all of this out as quickly as possible, and trying to get everyone their AIPs before the fall 2020 semester. And in terms of, you know, who gets issued their LOA first, basically, as soon as eligibility is passed on your application, we have staff who go through these lists of cases where eligibility is passed to send out those AIPs. So it really banks on whether or not, you know, you actually deserve that AIP because all of your documents are on file.
So the next question is about refusals, and this is coming in quite a lot. So I'm kind of clubbing together the different scenarios that we have been receiving. I have been receiving on the Q&A box. So people are asking what is, and if at all, there is an impact of previous refusals on their current study permit application. So some people were refused their study permits earlier. Some people were refused visitor visas earlier. And there are people who've been refused study permit applications, not for Canada, but other countries. So anything you would like to say there?
Yes. So number one, you need to make sure that you declare all of these refusals on your application. That's number one. So number two, in terms of whether or not it'll impact your current application, it depends why you were refused. If you were refused for an eligibility reason, to me, eligibility reasons are fixable. For example, you were refused a previous study permit because you didn't have enough funds. So now you can submit a new study permit demonstrating, yes, you now have enough money in your bank account, or you've paid the first year of tuition and you have a GIC, etc. Right? This is fixable. What isn't fixable are things like, you know, if you've if you are a criminal, you have a criminal record, and this makes you criminally inadmissible to Canada. So you may not be able to receive an approval. If, for example, you require a kidney transplant, this may make you medically inadmissible. And so until you fix your medical situation, you will not be able to travel to Canada. If you were deemed to be a terrorist or a spy, these are things that are not fixable because you may still be a terrorist or a spy. I mean, this is such a rare thing for students. For the most part, a lot of refusals really, like I said, banks on eligibility. For Canadian refusals, there is another thing that where, you may not be able to apply right away, but you may be able to apply down the line. So if you provided false documents or false information on a previous application, usually you are barred from reapplying for 5 years. So until those 5 years are up, you can't apply anytime soon. You'll have to wait for that period to pass before you can reapply again.
The next question is again about AIP. This is another misinformation, so maybe you would like to comment on that. It seems like quite a lot of agents are saying to their students that even if they get an AIP approval, it is not mandatory for them to attend online classes. So this person is asking, is it true? And if not, then will it affect the stage 2 application process or approval process?
So you receive AIP, you've paid for these classes, yet you don't want to attend them. Like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But if the reason you're not attending fall 2020 classes is because you're deferring to a later semester, like, that's fine too. But really, like, if that's your intention, then just apply for the winter 2021 semester. Like, don't lie to us and tell us you want to apply for fall 2020, hoping to get a visa faster. We have all of these applications to go through, and because we're going like by date order, essentially, where applications are complete or where we can make that AIP decision, you'll have to wait your turn anyways. And frankly, there's 4.5 months to the January 2021 semester. Please don't submit to us applications where you really don't intend for fall 2020. You can apply right now for January 2021. Like, there is nothing preventing you for applying for a study permit for January 2021. But put that on your application. Are we still sending out those AIPs? Technically, AIPs are only for the fall 2020 semester, and there's essentially 4.5 months for travel restrictions to be lifted and for you to make it to Canada. But at least your visa application is in, and it will be in process. So really, students really just need to be patient. We all need to be patient in these times of COVID-19. We understand that uncertainties are causing a lot of anxiety and stress. Believe me, we understand this. We're doing our best to try to provide you with reassurances through the measures we've introduced and trying to encourage you to invest in a Canadian education. But do yourself a favor, like, don't make it more complicated for yourself where you have to submit more documents later, etc. Like, provide the documents that belong on your application that really reflect your intentions, if that is for fall 2020 or winter 2021.
This next question is by a returning student, and I think this might also be relevant for other returning students. So, this person is asking, will returning students also need to provide an updated letter of enrollment because the previous one that they had provided already has their expected graduation date in it? So, what should they do in this scenario currently, the pandemic scenario?
So for returning students to be able to travel, they need to demonstrate that they are residing in Canada and that they're returning to studies they've already begun. So yes, you can certainly submit your previous LOA that you submitted with your application, but you also need to submit a more recently dated letter or document from your school stating that you are currently enrolled, that here is my transcript to show that these are the courses that I've already taken, and this is demonstrating to the Port of Entry Officer or CBSA that you are in the midst of your program. That is essentially what you have to demonstrate. So don't just rely on your old LOA. You need to provide a more recent document from your school indicating that you are still enrolled and that you're in the midst of your program. And I would highly, highly recommend that you include a set of transcripts to show that, here are the courses you've already taken, i.e. you've already started studying in Canada, and that you're just returning to finish the rest of your program.
The next question, Elena, is about errors that people have made in submitting their application. So this is coming in from a lot of people. People have made mistakes in spelling out their name. Sometimes it is not matching their passport. Some people have forgotten to add their marital status, and so on and so forth. So there are these different errors. So I'm asking on behalf of all of those people, what do they now have to do in order to share with IRCC the updated information or the corrected information? How do they send us that information?
So please use the web form to submit to us the correct information. And then for those of you who have not yet submitted an application, please double check your application to ensure that all of the information is correct so that we don't have to go through this process. Yes?
The next question is about GIC, or Guaranteed Investment Certificate. The person is asking, and they've not mentioned whether it is for SDS or non-SDS, so maybe we can address both. This person is asking, is GIC mandatory to show as proof of fund?
So for SDS, yes, most definitely it is mandatory to demonstrate that you have enough funds to provide for living expenses for your first year. That is the primary purpose of a GIC. If you are applying in the non-SDS stream, you can still submit a GIC as evidence of funds if you want to, but this is not mandatory.
The next question is about, so the person is referring to it as the air bubble, the recently introduced air bubble. So what I understand is probably they're referring to the new Air Canada flights, which are just going to start shortly. So they're asking about what are our comments on it. Maybe we can tell them something about the restrictions that will apply for travel to Canada within this Air Canada flights for students.
Oh, so I recommend please visit our website for all of the information you need on that.
Commented on this question a lot, and yes, we are getting a lot of it over and over again. People are expecting asking when they can expect to receive AIPs because their classes are starting. So this is coming in again and again. I think it's every fourth or fifth question is about the AIP processing time.
So yes, we understand the anxieties. We're working hard to get you all of those AIPs before your class starts. But as I mentioned before, as long as your application was submitted before September 15, your entire program will count towards your Pgwp, even if you get your AIP after you start your class. Thank you.
So the next question is actually quite a long question. And let me just ask that to you because it will probably help other people. I'm going to complete my 50% online study in India in August, and my visa is going to expire on 31st August, and I can't continue my studies here because otherwise I would not meet the requirement for PGWP. What should I do? Is there a need to reapply for visa and study permit just like the first time application?
So this is for a person who's never studied in Canada, like you're in a one-year program?
Yeah, seems like. And I'm assuming we have quite a lot of those students here. And yeah, we might want to address this for all of them.
Okay, so for the current measures with respect to online studies, the instructions are very clear. Maximum 50% of your program can be completed online outside of Canada. Maximum, you cannot exceed this. And that only applies if you want to use this program to get you a postgraduate work permit. If you want to just study to learn something new, to do some self-improvement, go for it. You can do the entire program online if you wanted to, right? The study permit is only for, and this 50% rule is really only for those who want to use the time that they've used on their studies to count towards their postgraduate work permit. So if that is your end goal, then yes, you will have to wait until the travel restrictions are lifted so that you can travel to Canada and complete your last semester in Canada. If you had never used your visa and were unable to travel because of the pandemic, you can go through the process of requesting a document replacement for your visa. So this is giving us your updated LOA. So this one needs to be a little bit tweaked, right? Because you're only completing your last semester in Canada. So your DLI will have to provide you a letter to sort of explain what's happened, that you've completed one semester, and even though there has to be a break because you want that final semester to be in Canada. So make sure your DLI sort of explains this in the documents they're going to give you. And then on top of getting that updated document, you need to provide the document replacement fee. It's $30. And then send this to us via web form for us to assess whether or not we will issue you a new visa. And then if that is the case, that we will just reissue the visa with a new date, then we'll send you a passport request letter and for you to submit your passport to a VAC once the VACs reopen.
The next question, Alina, you will know, we get this quite a lot, is people want to know how can they show us, or what are the documentary evidences that they can add in their application to convince the officer that they will be returning to their home country or wherever after their studies are over in Canada.
So basically that question is asking about how can I demonstrate ties. So you can talk to us about family members that you have to return to in your home country. If there's a job waiting for you, for the degree that you just completed, how are you going to use this in your home country? If you have assets, if you have property, that sort of thing, that's how you can demonstrate this. For students, we understand that a lot of you will be moving towards a postgraduate work permit after you complete your studies. And then beyond that, I know that a lot of you have the goal of obtaining permanent residence in Canada. So this piece about demonstrating ties is not such a large factor in the assessment of your application. So don't think that you need to go overboard in terms of documentation. Really, if you include in that letter of motivation I mentioned, so you're going to discuss why you've chosen this program, you're going to discuss your financial plan for your future years of study. You can also include a piece about, what your ties to your home country may be. That's what I would recommend. Thank you.
The next question is about letter of acceptance. So the person is asking, besides the start date and the end date of the program, is there anything else that IRCC expects to see in the letter of acceptance to say that it is a valid or a genuine letter of acceptance?
So all the schools have received a sample template of what IRCC expects to see in their LOA. And the schools have this information. So whatever your school is providing you, they've likely already taken this into account.
Okay, so the next question is maybe something which is there in a lot of students' minds. So they receive their AIP approval, they start their online courses from the fall 2020 semester, and after 2 months of doing online classes, they receive a refusal on their second stage. In that scenario, will they receive a fee refund? Would you like to comment on that, Elena?
So IRCC has no jurisdiction over refunds for tuition. You need to ask your DLI.
The next question is will probably be helpful for Quebec-bound students. So the person is asking that if a person is going or is bound towards a Quebec university or college, can they start their online classes without receiving an AIP? Because the Quebec government does not seem to have issued any advisory or notice regarding this particular thing.
So the CAQ is essentially needed for you to start your classes in Quebec. And for us, for IRCC, we need this for visa approval. And you'll need this actually for your AIP. So I think you need to think about getting that CAQ before you start anything, because this factors into your AIP decision.
Okay, so this person is asking, and if we can comment on it, what is the reopening of visa application centers dependent on? Is it something that we can share or comment on?
So this is primarily about the health and safety of everyone. So whether it's the VFS staff, whether it's the clients who are coming to use the services, this is our primary concern.
Okay, so this is a very interesting question. How do I prove family ties if the people who are my immediate family are already permanent residents of Canada? So in a scenario like that, does a student with family like that never be issued a visa?
No, that's not true. Like I said, demonstrating ties to your home country doesn't factor very much in the assessment of your application, because we understand that students are using this stream to basically obtain permanent residence down the line.
The next question is about an application. So like we've mentioned in our presentation also, that if someone doesn't have all the necessary documents for SDS, then it'll go to the non-SDS stream. So for those applications which were sent to us before March 18th and which are still under processing, the people had sent to them as SDS applications, but how would they know in the current scenario whether those applications were moved to non-SDS, or are they still being processed on SDS?
Oh, you won't know. Because basically, when an officer is reviewing it on the SDS side and then they realize it needs to be transferred to the non-SDS stream, you really won't know. Like even if you were to receive a visa, for example, or an AIP, there is no mention of such, whether it's in the SDS stream or not. Like this is something that this is a type of document or information that we do not relate to clients.
The next question is about the Pgwp policy, which is currently in place because of the pandemic. And this is mostly coming in from people who have a one-year program and have almost done 50% of their program here in India already. So they are asking, is there any update, or can there be expected to be any change in the Pgwp policy, especially for those kind of students who've already done 50% and have just a one-year course or a diploma?
So the question is about policy changes, and if there's any updates. No, there's none.
I'm just trying to sift through the questions because we're also coming towards the end of our time right now. And I'm just trying to see if there is something which is very generic and might help a lot of people. Okay, this is more a generic study permit related query. So this person has had a work experience and they left their job a while back, and now what they're asking is, will there be any implication of that gap, the work experience gap, in their visa application? And a similar question to this is also the fact where people are asking, will there be any impact of a study gap in their, like an education gap? Say they're going back to education after 10, 6, 7 years. So is there any impact on their study permit application?
Yes, so this factors into our assessment of whether or not you're a genuine student. So you need to explain to us in that motivation letter I mentioned why what were you doing during this period and why you're choosing now to return to your studies. Explain this well.
person is asking if there is a separate requirement for those applications which were submitted before March 18th. I know you have commented on this, on something like this earlier, but this person wants to know if they have submitted an application before March 18th and they had submitted everything, will they now have to submit something in addition, say, for example, an updated medical because it's been a while that they submitted it?
So the medical is usually valid for 1 year, and depending on when you did your medical, if your medical is expired, we have certain provisions to be able to extend a medical for a maximum of 6 months, but it doesn't apply to every case. So if in case a medical extension is not allowable in your case, we will let you know, and you might have to redo a medical. But if we can extend it, we just might, and then you won't have to provide any additional information.
Lena, as we are nearing the end of our webinar, maybe just a couple of more questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is something about hybrid courses. I've been receiving a lot of queries around hybrid courses. So a very common query is if it was a hybrid course, which is half physical and half online, the physical part was the first part in which they have already started, and that has also happened online. Now, how does that impact their PGWP?
So the PGWP requirement is that 50%, that maximum 50% of your course is done online. So if you're in a hybrid program, 50% of your course still can be maximum online. Like, that doesn't change. The calculation remains the same.
Maybe the last question for today. So the person is asking, you say that we can get support letters from our universities or colleges in case we want to prove or we know that our travel to Canada is essential to study in Canada. So what kind of support letters should they be? As in, I know it's kind of very vague, but the person maybe wants to know what should be mentioned in the support letter and what is the information that the university needs to provide, and how would IRCC probably verify that information genuine or not?
So in terms of support letters from your DLIs, your schools, like, really the only thing they can attest to is whether or not there are in-class components to your program, right? For fall 2020. And this support letter is being used to help facilitate your travel to Canada. So if there are in-class components, whether the entire semester is in class, whether it's a hybrid semester where part of the program is in class, or whether there are only components of that semester which require your physical in-class presence, like labs or workshops, that should be what is described in these letters. And in terms of verifications, I can tell you that our CBSA certainly does verify with the schools whether or not the documents being provided to the airlines are legitimate. So please don't create your own letters just to facilitate your travel. If we find out, we will revoke your study permit and you will be barred from reapplying for 5 years.
Okay, Elena, just one last question, if you're okay with it.
Sure.
Yes. So after the reopening of VAX, what can be the expected time for students with an AIP approval to receive their stage 2 approval after the reopening of VAX? Can we comment on that at this stage today?
So it depends on how many cases are in queue that require a visa. So I think that this question isn't about stage 2, but it's about asking for when the visa will be issued, right? So this banks on two things. So number one, how soon can those VACs reopen and what their capacity is, like whether there'll be limited service or whether it's full operations. Number two, how quickly can you, the client, get us your passport? So because none of the passports are here. So first you need to get us your passport, and then only when we receive it can we issue that visa. So right now, this is very difficult to comment because there's a lot of unknowns right now.
And I think that brings us to the end of the webinar today. So Alina, would you like to do the closing remarks?
Sure. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you took, and we appreciate that you still have a lot of questions, but we're hoping that the information we provided, whether through the presentation or through the Q&A section, has answered most, if not all, of your questions. We will be posting an FAQs to answer the common questions we've been seeing in all of these webinars. We intend to host a few more, so please check out our website, our Facebook page for another event that we'll be posting soon for another webinar. We'll continue these to ensure that students have all of the information they need to make a decision on their education in Canada. And we also intend to host more of these as more changes occur, like whether it's to travel restrictions or other special measures because of the pandemic. So please do stay tuned. Check out our Facebook page, our Twitter, YouTube channel for more information. Updated information can also be found on our website. So really, that should be your #1 place to go to for information. If you're receiving third-party information, please cross-check it with the information we have on our website. Like honestly, we are the correct information can only be found on our website. So if someone is telling you something that may not sit right with you, please double check. Check out our website. Check out our Facebook page. Check out our Twitter. Check out our YouTube channel for all of the correct information that you may need to help you make those decisions. So in the meantime, take care, stay safe, and we hope to connect with you again on one of these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina, and thank you to all the participants for joining us. Please do keep following us on social media for all the latest updates, and have a good day, all of you. Thank you.